Everybody ready? Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Virginia City Council Chambers. This is a Personnel Committee of the Whole meeting. I'll call this meeting to order. Today's date is Tuesday, July 12th, 2022. Two items on the agenda today. First item would be the review of the fire chief's job description, and item 2 is a closed meeting to discuss the development of an offer for the sale of a city asset pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.05, 13D.05, Subdivision 3. Thank you, and we'll turn this personnel meeting over to our City Administrator, Britt C. Bennis. Britt?
Thank you. From a previous meeting, we had tabled this fire chief job description to a personnel committee of the whole for discussion. And in your packet, you should see the 3 versions that were previously provided, the one that was original, the one that Chief Lewis recommended before he left, and then the one that the staff had recommended.
Hey, thank you. Councilor Beyondich.
Thank you. First, I just would like to make sure, is this meeting live? Are people able to view it?
Yep, I see it on YouTube right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll just guess I'll start. Light on. Councilor Beyondich.
Thank you. I kind of went through this and wrote my questions down beforehand, so I'm just going to rattle them off, and if you could just talk me through it. So I have the 2 job descriptions, the one that our previous chief had when he started, and then the suggested, or the one that was suggested. So could I ask, what did our past fire chief for education requirements, what did he have when he started?
I'll have to defer to Sherry. I was not here when Alan started. I started after Alan.
I would have to go to his personnel file and look that up. I have a pretty good memory, but we have about 150 employees.
So this proposed job description has some education pieces in it. And that's what I'm curious about. Did he have those, did the city pay for that education?
Scott, do you know Alan's background?
Chief Frederickson.
Good morning, everyone. Difficult question. I do remember, I believe year 2 was when he told me he completed his bachelor's. So, and his master's was a few years after that. The EFO training that's on there, I know that was right in the middle of his tenure as well, so.
And was that something that was paid for personally, or was that something the city paid for?
I would assume that the education reimbursement was utilized, but
At $500 a year.
$500 a year. So majority of it would have been out of his own pocket, yes.
And can I say something? His wage was not what it is now. He did not come in at $107,000.
So that wage increased as the education pieces
No,
came
the
in?
wage increased as the MAPE contract was negotiated. We'd been 2 negotiations ago.
Okay. And the other, and I guess that was kind of one of my questions with this, was the start and the end pay, and how did that come about? So it's mostly through the negotiations, it wasn't having to do with the education pieces?
Correct. This was negotiations for everybody in the MAPE union.
Okay.
And I think maybe to answer a little bit more of your question, Councilor Beyondich, is that he did receive a Bush Foundation grant in the amount of $100,000 as from the Bush Foundation, and utilized that money that he obtained to utilize for additional education credits that was at no cost to the city.
Thank you. And
Yes, in this last year, correct. Yes, thank you.
And I think that along the way when I was learning, I did ask questions on when he required travel time or when anything was required. I always ask, was that funded by a grant or by the city? And most of it, from what I can recall when he'd answer, a lot of that was through a grant, through different grants. Is that correct?
Once again, I'd have to go back to the travel request, which the council did approve, so.
Right, and those, as those came up, that's what I was trying to ask, how is that being funded? Was it grant funding or was it?
Some of the travel was funded by the city, by council approval, and some,
Do they have a travel allowance, a travel budget?
yes, they do have in their ambulance and fire budget, there is a travel line item.
And was that ever exceeded?
Once again, I'd have to go back. I know some line items were exceeded, but that specific one, I'd have to go back and review it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Beyondich. Counselor Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I'm looking at, I did talk to a MAPE union representative or two, and one of the concerns about having a very high threshold for minimum educational requirements was pricing ourselves out of a qualified person. We are an 8,600 citizen town. We are kind of in the middle of nowhere when it comes to having folks like Alan work here. I mean, we really were lucky to have someone with his skills. And I want to make sure, I like the proposed by the staff, has some minimum requirements, but it's not a high-level requirement, knowing that folks can attain, as Alan did, attain additional education and experience. I know that we have people that are currently working for us that started, if I'm remembering right, as an explorer. They've gone through our Explorer program. If not, they came to us right out of Mesabi Range College programs. They did their ride-alongs here. And I think that's the opportunity I want to make sure that we are maintaining, is allowing our staff to work their way up here and have a career in our fire department. The $500 educational reimbursement is at best a token when it comes to anybody in the city. Purchasing the equipment or the books or the online material needed for $500, you're lucky to get that if you can. And I know we had that discussion earlier about what it looks like for an educational reimbursement. I know that that a lot of time, and I'm not going to call it downtime, Chief, but a lot of the time that our employees at the fire department are not physically on a run or physically training, they are reading or they are sitting in front of a computer training. There is not a whole lot of time at which they're not doing something fire-related. Even at mealtime, when I've popped in, there's a book out or there's some conversation about best practices. So we as a city do help. We're paying folks to get their education because they're working and paying at the same time. So there's a little compensation there, but I just want to make sure that whatever contract or whatever job description we come up for the fire chief, it allows our younger firefighters and those with ambitions to have the ability to move up through the ranks to attain chief here. That's really important to me because to have a career firefighter keep their career here in Virginia means that they've raised family here, they brought family in during holidays, they're spending their money locally. So I appreciate the requirements as suggested by staff as they move forward and being able to get that stuff. So with that, I think it's just really important to keep in mind what we're asking for and that we're not asking for so much that someone's going to come here from somewhere else as a fire chief. And don't get me wrong, I have no problem with people coming in. That's part of what we do. But come in, get their 5 years of experience here, and then move on to another fire department somewhere. I think we have to find the balance in maintaining a healthy building, a healthy camaraderie. And again, because of the level of trust and what firefighters are asked to do for each other, it's really important that they trust each other and they're able to maintain that trust so that our buildings in our city can be safe. So, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Johnson. Before we go to Counselor Bearable, I'll just say my piece right now. We've looked at this job description on a number of occasions. We looked at the job description that was recommended by the former chief. We look at the job descriptions with input from staff, from the interim chief and others. And I took a look at the job description that staff is recommending, and I have no problem with what's recommended by staff moving forward. I think it's a fair and equitable job description that gives most everybody an opportunity, whether to move up or whatever the case may be. So I don't have an issue with the issues. I don't have anything with the staff's recommendation with respect to this, and so I defer the rest of the council moving forward to any changes that they might want to recommend moving forward. So, Councillor Bearable.
We have a couple of things as counselors in this community to really take a look at. The job description, when I went over the new one that the staff is recommending, I don't see any huge issues with that either. But we have to remember, this is not an 8,600 or 8,712 community. This extends way beyond our community, everything that the chief has to do with our fire department. You got to take a look at the population outside and the demographics that we cover is about 50,000 or just a hair under that. So we're like a large city here, this department. We're not like a small city. Education, I've been on this city council now 26 years. We've always allowed education for our employees. We've raised the level a little bit, but I agree with Councillor Johnson. It's not enough money for people that improve themselves in their education processes. And we've seen a number over the years, more than a number, that have used the education credits and the dollars to further themselves. And we have employees that have done this, and I believe we still have employees, Britt, if I'm not correct, that have utilized this and are still here with us. And it's a benefit to the city to allow them to do their education credits, no matter how they get them, whether it's correspondence, whether it's other. If they need time off, sometimes they have to use their own time off to get some of these education credits. It's not all done on the city's. Well, we don't even do it on the dime unless it's for education for their licensure and other things like that they need for upgrading their services within the city. I have no problem with seeing education used as a step forward to increasing their jobs and whatever they need to do, or cross-transferring if they want to cross-transfer into the city. It's important for the city that you keep that level high for your employees. And then if you need new employees, if they transfer up with the process we use, then you usually bring on a bottom line person and they have the same opportunity to increase their level of education within the city. So I think that's very, very important for our employees within this city. So enough said, but I do not believe we need to cut back on things. I think we need to increase the level of dollars from 500 to 1,000. That's my personal opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Bearable. So, every single department in our organization has a travel budget. The purpose of travel is to travel to areas for additional educational opportunities if it's not provided locally. So we do allow staff, whether it's fire, police, every career enhancement opportunities for education to enhance their career, to keep them updated on their on their educational experiences so they can continue to provide the updated professional services that we need and expect from them. And we get that from our employees, the ones who take advantage of the opportunity to travel, who want to do more than just the basic firefighting work, or they want to have some supervisory skills or add to our administrative opportunities. We provide that on a regular basis based upon what's in the budget. So that's already built in. But we don't have any other lights on right now, so I really, looking at the job description, I really would like to hear from you, Chief, and maybe Joel, Battalion Chief Martinson. What's your thoughts on this job description, that staff? I know that you had some input in this. Freddie?
I don't want to speak for Marty and the IFF local, but from the MAPE perspective,
Yep.
this is a tough discussion. It almost comes across as we're saying, let's fight for less education. Please know that is not our intent. Our intent is, I use our most senior member, Battalion Chief Poffs, he's on year 23, and he's being told through that proposed job posting that he's not qualified today. 23 years in this city should have value too, and that's been our whole push. We're asking for middle ground. That education is important. But how do we get there? How do we now, just by this discussion alone, we're telling our staff, if you want to move into these spots in the future, you better start working now. Instead of that hard stop, not qualified, has been how MAPE sees that, and I don't want to speak for Marty. But.
No, and that's a good distinction. Thanks, Chief. Councilor Paulson.
Thank you. And I appreciate that distinction. I think that makes sense instead of to hard line. I understand where you're coming from on that. I do have a couple questions, though. And when we've had discussions in the past, even within the MAPE union, how many MAPE union members do have advanced degrees? Do we know that?
And Jody, don't know what the new at the event center. I'm not sure there. I do not. I don't believe Maddie or Chad do. Sorry for the quick game of math and memory here, but
So a percentage, maybe
third
okay.
ballpark.
Okay.
My guess.
So that bar, that education requirement would alienate 2/3, basically, of staff if their positions were vacated to fill, if we implemented a higher education requirement. So the question that I have then, a couple questions. Under the desirable education, licensure, certification, and experience, it's under the required education, and it's the desirable education. I understand what the certification is on an IFSAC Fire Officer 2, but so that's number 10. I'm unsure what the completion of the National Fire Academy Executive Fire Officer Program means, and I looked that up, but I couldn't find what that means. So I don't understand. If we don't know what that is, why that's in there. Can anyone tell me what that, I mean, we're saying this is what's desirable, we're putting it out there.
I don't have
but
that. Yeah,
I Googled it and I couldn't find,
It's extensive. I know Alan, that took him a couple years to obtain. That was a lot of that EFO classes out on the executive fire officer classes out on the East Coast at the National Fire Academy. Extensive. I don't have that in front of me, but that's, yeah.
and so what I'm looking at is how would these certifications benefit anyone in a leadership role going forward? And is this something that, if it is beneficial and it would bring back knowledge and expertise to be able to train, staff, I would view that number 9 and number 10 are important, if I understood what number 9 was. But number 10, on that certification, I think that's part of the discussion that I had prior with, it's a certification process, and it basically, you go through the different levels of the criteria, and then you're able to then demonstrate that you can succeed or exceeded or whatever the word is.
I know where you're going. Yeah.
You've been able to show or display that you've mastered those leadership skills. So to me, that one I think is an important one. It might not have to be in the required, but I think if those are things that are desirable, those are things that we should be working on within the department then to bring back in terms of leadership goals. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. All ranks, we view trainings that way. Is it personal gain for you to move on, or is it a departmental gain?
Yeah.
And that's to your point.
Yeah,
Exactly.
so, and then, let's see, the other question I had is, item number 4, it just says a valid vehicle operator's license equivalent to a Minnesota Class D or greater. Do you need a different class to drive any of those rigs?
Shaking her head, no?
No, you don't, no. Surprisingly, I know it's
Yeah, that's
surprisingly.
surprising.
It is surprising. You only need a Class D.
So I just wanted to ask that question and address that issue. And then I think, you know, in the original discussion, oh, no, that's okay. In the original discussion, I think for me, when we were discussing the education requirement and then looking what the salary rate was at the MAPE rate is 107 or 110?
Sorry. Mayor,
Sherry?
Counselor Paulson, it is 110.
110, okay, that's what I had recalled. So then if we go back and we remove some of that education piece in there, but so I would say that then the salary amount comes down, but Sherry, what you're saying is that in the MAPE negotiation, it was not based on an education requirement, it was negotiated just as a MAPE contract in general.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, Brett, but there was a market value adjustment. And I can't remember what year it was, if it was this last negotiations or the one before. So there was and that was across the board for all MAPE members. And then percentage increase, because I'm not going to toot MAPE's horn here, but they are the only union shop that has either taken a 0 or 1% increase versus the 3 that a lot of the others have had.
So it was just evaluated overall in the MAPE contract, it wasn't looked at like department head by department head.
Correct. We actually compared, I think Councilor Baraboo instructed us to compare different cities and their chiefs.
And I
the
remember
different-
that, yep. So we had like Hibbing, Grand Rapids, I do remember us doing that. So basically, what this job description is in front of us, that's put forward by the staff, that is commensurate with the salary range of starting at $110,000.
And I would say yes, but if the council wants to negotiate, they could go into, and Brian, correct me here, they could open up and negotiate with MAPE if they felt they wanted to negotiate that salary down or up.
And I guess, I'm just looking at some of those education pieces, and I think the certifications are really what I'm looking into right now. Like that, to me, demonstrates that you've passed that leadership step or that certification in training or whatever that is. So to me, those were pretty important elements. So I don't know how you would view putting that forward into this as well, as to make sure that those steps are taken, as I do think that's important. You know, we've got a new public safety center coming. There's going to be a lot of different challenges for leadership in that role coming up. So I don't know, do you have any suggestions on that?
Once again, I think that we should work with MAPE and the union rep. I think it is, I do agree, it's just like the city clerk has to have certain certifications, clerk certification. We also looked at years of experience. Back to the education piece, there's quite a few that have bachelors in MAPE, and I can get you a list, and some have masters. And a lot of them came with experience, I mean, years of experience. We're talking 10 to 20.
And we just happened, our prior chief, I mean, I don't know when he achieved those milestones, I'm not sure, but for me, I just think it's important that for me to be able to demonstrate that leadership threshold with those certifications, I think is important. So those are my comments, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Paulson. Counselor Freely?
You know, we seem to be living in an era right now where there's kind of a discrediting of formalized education. I mean, that's bothersome to me to some degree. But there's something that needs to be said about experiential education, particularly in this profession. And I think that the staff has put together a job description that indicates the fact that they are confident as a staff in the experiential education that they've got on their staff at this point in time, with a minimum of 10 years of full-time experience, at least 5 years of supervisory experience, and at least 2 years of post-secondary education. So I feel that I can be very supportive of this in the fact that I trust the staff to know what the internal leadership is in their group, and that there is somebody in that group that can provide the city with the kind of leadership they're looking for the city itself as well as the staff. So I am fully in favor of the proposed job description as stated by the staff because of the confidence they show in one another and the experience that they have as a group.
Thank you, Counselor Freely. Counselor Bearable?
Yeah, I'm looking at this and the education criteria and the experience, you know, you look at the new proposed, it's 10 years of experience. It's not years and years and years, and most of those individuals might be looking for an upgrade to a chief or whatever. They would have that experience from within. But we have to look at one huge thing. We're doing a brand-new public safety center. Don't forget, don't look at it today, look at it 5 years down the road now. What is one of the things we've said about that new public safety center? It's going to become a regional training center. That's what we're looking at down the road on this. So you have to have individuals that go to these education things, like out to the national, whatever it is, and bring back information for training. They can't just pick it out of thin air without having actual experience at these different places and getting their certifications from those. If we're going to put on a first-class training center for all departments around the area and maybe from further away from here to do this, that was going to be an area where we could gain some dollars once we get this rolled into place. And I'm not looking tomorrow when we finish this. I'm looking down the road here that we'll integrate this into our whole public safety system, and that not only includes fire, but it includes police department. That's where I'm looking as a counselor. So I think these criteria are good that are in this particular thing. We can tweak it a little bit with MAPE. I don't have a problem if we want to go and tweak it a little bit and bring it back for final approval, but I think it's been done very well already. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before we go to Counselor Johnson, I just want to tack on to the point you made about this as a regional public safety center. You know, I mean, we talked about this before. I mentioned it before that when I worked on the Metro, we had initiative. We built a new center. It was a central regional thing for police and fire, yada, yada, yada. But what we did was, instead of sending our personnel out, and we're not talking about the fire chief job description here, but it equates to what you were saying. You know, this job description gives people within our current organization the opportunity and qualification to apply for the chief. I think that's important, that we don't, we give every opportunity for those who have dedicated their time and training and their expertise here and living and working in an old facility. But a regional training center is, instead of sending the employee out to Washington, D.C. or to Texas or something, with the regional public safety, you bring them here. You pay them their $2,500 or their $4,000 fee, and then they train all the employees at one time, and you bring other departments in because it's regional, and they pay a specific fee to help offset the cost of that training to come in. Everybody benefits from it. We do as well. We have a professional work environment, and that's coordinated by the chief and his or her staff. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at it. Councilor Johnson, then back over to Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I have one question on page 11. At the top, nature of work, the last sentence says the fire chief may be designated as the City of Virginia's emergency manager at times. That's designation's done by the council, correct? Can we put that in there, that fire chief may be designated by the council? I think that makes it very clear that we're giving that authority, and then we also have the ability to remove that authority when that's done. That's my only comment. Otherwise, I'm ready to move forward on this.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Johnson. I think it also says in the emergency operations plan, that very thing designated, council makes that decision to designate, so having that in the job description makes a lot of sense. Councilor Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. So kind of to tack on to what you're saying and what Counselor Verbu is saying, to me, I think those certification qualifications are important. And I don't know if we can incorporate them in, or in the past, we've said can be obtained by such and such. But to me, I think it's important if we're going to bring those elements back to the department and thinking long-term, not just here and now in the present, but with our new public safety center and what our goals that we would like to achieve within that, building of that center. To me, I think those things are important. So I would like to see that somehow incorporated into this job description other than just under desirable education.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other lights on here? Okay, Britt, any further comments?
I was just going to kind of go back on what Councilor Paulson was saying. We certainly can meet with MAPE and work out a discussion, like you mentioned previously. I need time to figure out how long those normally take. That must obtain within 6 months, 2 years, whatever the courses are. But we certainly could add that in there, that it is a mandatory, but you have the ability to obtain. And I think that's what the staff was coming with, is that Alan got to obtain these things while he was working here. They want the chance to obtain them as well while they're working here. So I think MAPE would be, not speaking for MAPE, but make sure, Friday's shaking his head, yes, they would be amicable to that.
Yeah, if it becomes a requirement, but ability to obtain within a certain period of time after appointment, yeah, that makes perfectly good sense to me. Okay, thank you. Before Councilor Baraboo, does Councilor Cherry, any other comments for you from a person, as our Human Resources Director? We're good?
No, I agree with, even what Britt and Julianne said. If we
Okay.
put a 6 months, I don't know how long it takes, sorry. Could take, what,
Look that up as well.
yeah, so, I'd hate to set a certain time, but work with MAPE on that.
Well, when we appoint somebody, and it's a desirable qualification, or a mandatory qualification that they have to obtain with a certain amount of time, we certainly have an obligation as a city to ensure we give them the opportunity to do that, right? So, okay, thank you. Joel, Battalion Chief Martinson.
Just to piggyback off of what Freddie was saying, we also agree with the education aspect of it. Also, over the last 2.5, 3 years during COVID, we're understaffed, working call volume up. Emmitsburg, the National Fire Academy is a 2-year course. You get a master's out of it, I believe, when it's all said and done. Emmitsburg, the National Fire Academy was shut down also during COVID, along with a lot of these educational pieces that were put there. That's kind of why our proposal of like allowing maybe to obtain during the position was there. But just a reminder, like COVID over the last 2.5, 3 years did shut down a lot of these opportunities to gain these certificates and stuff, especially the National Fire or Executive Officer course.
Yeah. Thank you, Joel. Appreciate that. Very good point. Councilor Baraboo?
Yeah, I
And
just
we'll
had-
hopefully maybe look for an opportunity to move forward with
Yeah, I
this.
just had one quick comment. By what I was saying before about the regional training center, I didn't mean that I don't want any individual that wants to get training so they can help in that in the future. I don't mean that by just sending 1 or 2 people. I mean, anybody would be eligible if they have the time and the wherefore and the city approves stuff to go to do these things. But it's going to be important for the future of this public safety center that we just move forward. And I'll be ready to make a motion after, I think, Councilor Johnson.
Yeah, and I know that there's a couple of little bits of information that we've disseminated to our staff to make a couple of tweaks into the job description itself. But to move this thing forward I think is important and get this job description approved as expeditiously as possible. We have we have professional people running the organization now, so there's no big hurry, but we do want to make sure that we permanently, appoint a chief of the fire department, and then, the dominoes fall with the different opportunities within the department as one moves up. So, Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going over this and I don't see it. Okay, so it would be under responsibilities. And obviously, it says it's not meant to be inclusive of all duties to be assigned, so things can be added or removed or changed. I understand that. But given the report from the auditor regarding the department as a whole, could we add an element of a report, a financial report to the council quarterly or monthly, or how, just so we have, in my opinion, like that just came up so, like all of a sudden, it would be nice to have some sort of a report generated by the department so that the council could kind of, there's some benchmarks of where we're at. And I don't know if that's a quarterly benchmark. I don't know what Medicare reimbursement is, what, is it 6 months or 3?
Every 3 quarterly.
It's quarterly. So would that be something that we could add, like just to generate some like financial report?
We
from
usually
the
do
chief?
a monthly financial report.
Pardon me?
We usually do a monthly financial report of all the departments, including fire
And
and
we received
ambulance.
that, I think, in our email, but I mean just from the chief itself as a responsibility to oversee, that's kind of where I'm going with that, if that could be woven into that responsibility.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
We can add that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I get that suggestion about making that a requirement. I think all department heads need to provide a report to our city staff with respect to whatever it is, and that report is disseminated to us as we need to be. I don't know if it's necessarily required to be in a job description, because if it's in the fire chief's job description, it better well be in the police chief's job description, the public works job description, everybody else's job description that has supervisor or department head requirements, including the people sitting up here too. So I don't know if it's necessarily required to be in the job description, but it doesn't bother me one way or the other, so
That would be a goal of mine, Mayor.
I'll go.
Just for each department, it would be very helpful, for staff at the ITMAC, it would be really helpful. So if we can move in that direction as a personnel, discussion, I think that would help us tremendously. Thank you.
Yeah, it's in or out, it doesn't matter to me. I think the job description is pretty solid the way it is, with a couple of tweaks that were suggested by council to include in there. And what I like about the suggestions being made and the adjustments being made, it does provide opportunities for both within the department in order to qualify candidates from within the department to apply for this position, which is very important to our community as a full-time staff. So, okay, any other questions, comments, or motions on the part of the council? Councilor Bearable.
I'm going to make one just quick comment, then I'll make a motion here, Mayor. I don't think we need to include in the job descriptions that particular thing that Julianne's looking at. I think you just need to make a policy for the whole work, just a policy, a new policy that would be approved and get buy-in and input into for that. So we don't have to have, every time we do it, hire, we don't want to tweak every job description. So that's my suggestion on there. Then I'm going to make a motion that we incorporate the new job description proposed by staff with the new tweaks that were recommended by the council, and have, if we can, Britt, in 2 weeks on the 26th, which is our next council meeting, if we can have those done and incorporated. And you're going to have to work with MAPE to do some of this. Is that feasible to do that in 2 weeks? I don't think we can do it before then unless the mayor decides to have a special meeting if it gets done earlier. But we need to move forward with this, and that's my motion.
Okay, did you get that motion, Pam? A motion by Councilor Bearable to move forward with a job description that is presented by staff with a couple of amendments that were suggested by council, and to have that final job description for the fire chief ready for the next council meeting. Is there support? Support by Counselor Freely. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Beyondich.
Sorry, I just have one more. And I'm looking at all three of these, and what was suggested, what was original, and then the proposed by staff. And this isn't in there anywhere, that, under the work schedule with a reasonable response time. Is that, I mean, I've looked at some of our neighboring communities, and they have response time in. Is that something that is normal, or I mean, I know that when we've talked before, we can't, but I was just curious about that.
Sherry?
I was going to ask Brian. Brian, is there, for key employees, response time, 20 minutes or?
Well, and in this case, it actually goes beyond just key employees. The conversation is exactly right. The geographic limiters on job requirements is very, very frowned upon. However, in emergency response positions or in our EMS fire type positions, we are able to put restrictions on that they be able to respond within a reasonable amount of time. And that is, from my experience, a common aspect of these types of positions.
And I think to add on to that, there is, I believe, because we had to deal with this when I was down the metro, I know that, and I know that hasn't changed at all. There's some courtrooms about what's reasonable in with respect to response. And the reasonable is, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. They don't give a specific time, but it's what they call reasonable, and what we consider to be reasonable based upon the type of position that we're putting that restriction on, which you indicated, Brian, is emergency services, which is police and fire. We had police officers living 60 miles away. They were on call, and there's no way they could respond within 20 or 30 minutes. And so there was some case law that was established with respect to that. But please continue.
And just because I had pulled up some of our neighboring communities and looked at, I was kind of going through all of it. But that was, I didn't know, because we didn't have it in the original one. Is that from what I'm seeing? Have we ever had that?
But we used to have a limit, what was it back a long time ago, that you had within so many minutes or so many miles from here?
20-minute response
I
time.
think it was 20 minutes,
That's-
but with 30 mile.
If I recall, 2025.
25.
That would have been Dana era. It went away, yeah, so 0405.
Okay. I was just curious about that, because I'd seen that in the first, I don't see it in the others, and I didn't know if you just decided not to put it in, or if there was,
You know, was it a law change, or was it a ruling from the National Labor Bureau or something? There's something that happened that we had to take out the time, the actual time. We had to put reasonable instead of minutes.
okay.
And that is correct. There has been not an immediately recent, but a semi-recent change that addressed those items once again. And as I'd indicated, we are still able to require reasonable response times, but we're not allowed to require that you live within city limits, or that we can't put a geographic limiter on it, and we've got to be careful about how we define it. But we are able still to say that you've got to be within a reasonable distance, a reasonable response time to the station.
And not that we want to do this, but the situation that came about when I was working, there was an individual who lived 40 miles away from the job. Wasn't required at any particular time, was a police officer. There were several of them. They weren't required to respond in an emergency manner. But in order for them to get on the emergency response team, in order for them to become a supervisor who was on call, they had to live within this certain area, and this individual was a male police officer. When they applied for the position, they required him as part of the job description that was part of that job description. And so when that individual was negated from doing that, that prompted some legal issues, and then that requirement was not able to apply because it was based on job performance, job description, things that, not geographic of which the person lives. And I don't think we want to uproot somebody to take a job, to be in a supervisor position, to have to move his family from a home, and he's probably lived there for 10, 15, 20 years in order to take this job. So, Councilor Beyondich.
So my question is, do we have people that would step into that role in the case of that?
We have supervisory positions within the police department where they live outside the city limits, quite a ways outside the city limits.
I just brought it up as a question, so thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Beyondich. So it has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion?
Just
Councilor Baraboo.
one quick thing for everybody here. In this day and age right now, with trying to restrict any of our emergency personnel of where they live, it's hard to do because the mayor is correct. They may have been living in a home for 5, 10 years, plus the fact that you cannot find right now good homes any place around the area that if you were forced to move, which there would be a court case, I guarantee you, on something like that, because there are not homes available right now. We're finding that out with our relocation of individuals from the public safety area. But my motion still stands with what I said, so we should probably vote on it.
Okay, thank you. So it has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion from the council? Anything from staff? Chief, anything else? Okay, thank you. Has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. One more question. Has it in the past been the chief's, in the job description, to oversee the supervision of the Fire Explorer program? Because I know in the past, Chris Clark had led that up. So does that need to be in there under the chief, or do we need to put that somewhere else?
You're right. Chris Clark did oversee that program, but just in how our chain of command works, the fire chief oversees all of that, right? So everything Chris Clark oversaw, Chief Sombrella
So you're
oversaw
fine,
that too.
you're
So
comfortable with
it's-
leaving that in there?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's,
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Paulson. It has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Freely.
Sorry about that, Mayor. Can you tell me, like the bachelor's degree in leadership management is a desired certification, so to speak. So like if you were going to look to complete the National Fire Academy Executive Fire Officer Program, is a prerequisite for that having a bachelor's degree. We know that. And so the reason I ask that is that I want this job description to promote and encourage continued education and the pursuit of an eventual bachelor's degree as you grow into this position. I guess that's what I'm looking for. And so like if I would think that to become certified at that level as an executive officer, more than likely the prerequisite would be a bachelor's degree. So that's kind of what I'm looking for in this, is that we're providing you the opportunity to give us the job description as promoted by staff, but that it's going to promote and encourage continued education in that position to be fully educated and a bachelor's degree or beyond, even a master's degree. Does that make sense?
absolutely. And we look at it the same, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn for the fire local as well, as we, no matter what rank, no matter what we do, dealing with people, billing, budget, service, what more can we do? We try to reside right there. So I think I agree with you, yes.
Thank you, Councilor Freely. You have an excellent point there. Okay, so, all right. We have you have the information you need, Britt, moving forward? Thank you. So it has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Marty.
Thank you. The second item on the agenda is a closed meeting to discuss the development of offer for sale of city assets as per Minnesota statute 13D05 subdivision 3.
Okay, looking for a motion to close this meeting regarding this matter.
So moved.
Moved by Counselor Freely, supported by Counselor Johnson. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed, motion carries.